All right, let's talk about Gio Reyna, because that was the big talking point coming into this game. What was Greg Berhalter going to do with him? He started him. He gave him 45 minutes. What did you think of the performance?
I thought that was positive, especially for a player that's only played, 26 minutes all year. I thought it was positive to see Gio Reyna enjoying himself. And he had a chip on his shoulder for obvious reasons. First camp back with the U.S. Under Greg Berhalter, and he's playing against the German national team. Oh, by the way, where does he, apply his trade? In Germany, in the Bundesliga. It meant something for him. He was very positive when he had the ball, but it's the moments when you don't have the ball, and that's going to be rust. That's going to be him getting settled and back into it. But just a simple presence of Gio Reyna in the attacking third made Christian Pulisic brighter, made Florian Balogun so much brighter. Florian Balogun's a player that you need to get going, right? He's movements. His bread and butter are his movements. When Gio's on the field, you can just see him link up. You can see him give him a quick view with the eye. I'm making this run. I know I'm going to get it. Tim Weah, the same thing. When he was off the field, we saw a Florian Balogun that kind of shut down, a Florian Balogun that was nowhere to be seen. And if Florian Balogun's on the field and he's making runs and you can't get him the ball, he's not doing much else for you. That's a reality. He's not defending for you. He's not linking up for you. He's not being dangerous for you. He needs people to recognize those runs so he can get on the end of them and finish. If he doesn't do that, it's just another guy out there.
Gio Reyna wasn't the standout to me. If I was going to pick one from the U.S. in the first half, it definitely would have been Tim Weah. To me, he is clearly, almost every time he plays, becoming the guy for the U.S. He's so dangerous, and he's so consistent on a team that doesn't always have consistent threats in the attacking third. But I think when you look at what happened with Gio Reyna, the best way to evaluate may be to look at the difference between the first half and the second half, because it is a tale of two halves. How much of that, Herc, in your opinion, was down to the fact that Gio Reyna was on the field for the first 45 minutes and then wasn't for the second 45 minutes? Because I think we saw something similar with the United States in the CONCACAF Nations League. The difference when Gio Reyna is on the field versus off, it's pretty stark. It's almost black and white.
Yes. I will add another name, Tyler Adams, into the mix. Giovanni Reyna being on the field will occupy defenders in a way where you can give Gio the ball and he will be an outlet. He will get out of things by himself. He can link up to relieve pressure. It definitely gives you something to drive the ball and move forward. But when you don't have that, and when you're going to defend, when you need structure, when you need discipline, that is where you're missing your captain. That is where you're missing a Tyler Adams. He not being there put so much more pressure on Yunus Musah, Weston McKennie, but especially Yunus Musah. And in that second half, you can see Yunus, maybe throughout that first half as well, when the ball that Leroy Sané comes right down the middle and he dives and leaves his feet very early. He's not accustomed to being that holding midfielder, and it's going to take some time for him to feel good and comfortable there. He doesn't have the same elements around him as he will at Milan, where the defensive structure just in Italy itself is much more profound than it probably is anywhere else in the world. You can definitely see that they were missing a player of those attributes.
When you talk about the sixth position, right, I wonder if it's one of those positions where if you have two, you don't really have one. Because when Tyler Adams is the guy in there, you know whose responsibility is to do that defensive work. You know who's going to cover the ground. When he's not in there, even when it's Weston McKennie and Yunus Musah, two totally capable players in their own right, mostly in different positions, it seems to be confusion, right? And maybe the Germans were a team that took advantage of that and made that confusion a little bit more obvious. But it seemed to be that zone right in front of your two center backs is where you're trying to keep the opposition away from, was very, very open. And if I were to imagine a game without Tyler Adams, I would have imagined it like this. I would have imagined a first half that was really end-to-end, wide open. And I would have imagined a second half where the opposition, especially if they're high quality, basically did whatever they wanted to the American midfield. So I see the concern here for Tyler Adams. The bigger concern is this is the reality of international football. You are always going to have somebody not at your disposal. And if we know anything about Tyler Adams in this current injury, it may be Tyler Adams that's not at your disposal for a while. So it's not enough, is it, to just point at Tyler Adams and say, well, that's the reason we got hosed by Germany on Saturday. There has to be more to it than simply his absence.
No, it's not just Tyler Adams. They may have still lost the game with Tyler Adams on the field, but it would have been much more competitive than what we saw. And there could be a brainiac out there. Well, Tyler Adams on the field when the Netherlands beat the U.S. men's national team in the round of 16. That's true, but that was a Tyler Adams that was like on 30% energy level because of how much he put into that group phase where he didn't get a rest, where he didn't get a breather. So you could imagine a Tyler Adams that's fully fit and fresh in a game like this would have helped your chances. But you're absolutely right. Look, this starts at the front. This is the U.S. men's national team having to realize that they're not that team to boss top teams or to try to compete with top teams in that way. And that's fine. Listen, the darlings of the last World Cup were Morocco. Morocco would sit, fight, claw, and defend with every ounce that they had. 11 players on the field. And then they would go up the other end of the field, you know, 1 or 2 players at a time or defend on set pieces. And they bounced the likes of Spain, Portugal. They got out of the hardest group, you know, in the World Cup. They barely lost out to a team like France. You know, they showed a blueprint of how to compete when you don't have that type of talent. Sometimes it's about swallowing your pride, not letting your ego get in the way. And I know Greg Berhalter wants to make this program, you know, first it was change the way that the rest of the world views Americans or American soccer. Now it's, you know, change soccer America forever. That's good and fine. But if you don't win, you're not going to do that. I don't care how pretty you try to play.
It's funny you mentioned the Netherlands game. I definitely felt some similarities watching this game to how I felt watching the Netherlands game, just in terms of kind of the gap between the two countries. If there's an example for the Americans to draw from, though, Herc, you could easily point to Morocco. You could also point to what this team did against England. They didn't try to go toe-to-toe in the traditional sense. It was much more pragmatic. They basically played, if you'll remember, a 4-4-2, which we had not really seen, and it gave the English fits. That's something that this team can do. You can play against the best teams in the world, or one of the best teams in the world, in this case, England, and play an even match and create your chances and maybe even have a moment to win the game. But when you try to go toe-to-toe against Netherlands, when you try to play against a Germany, and maybe in a friendly you allow it, but this team is just clearly not at that level. It's the pragmatic approach that they need to take, but they've done it before themselves against England.